The Book of Revelation. I mean, just saying the name conjures up all these wild images, right? Beasts, angels, epic cosmic battles. It's got to be one of the most fascinating, but also one of the most confusing books in the Bible. But what if the book itself actually gave us the decoder ring? What if there was a single verse that acts like a divine table of contents, laying out a clear roadmap for the entire thing? Well, today we're diving into a framework that claims to have found that exact key. So let's see what it's all about. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to track down this so-called interpretive key. Then we'll use that key to unlock 3 different parts of the book: what you have seen, what is now, and what will take place later. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at what this particular framework says is the ultimate point of the entire book. Okay, so where do you even start with a book this complex? Well, this whole framework, this entire way of looking at it, really hinges on one single verse that the source material claims is basically a divinely inspired table of contents. You know, so many people crack open Revelation and they're just instantly overwhelmed. Is this supposed to be history? Is it some kind of symbolic poem? Or is it a literal play-by-play prediction of the future? That confusion, right there, is the exact problem that this interpretation is trying to solve. And this is it. Revelation chapter 1, verse 19. According to this view, this is the master key. It's not just a random instruction to the author, John. No, it's presented as a direct outline from God, splitting the entire book into 3 very distinct sections. Let's break that down, because it's pretty straightforward. The verse tells John to write about 3 things. First, the things he has seen, that's past tense. Second, the things that are, that's present tense. And third, the things that will take place later, that's future tense. See? Past, present, future. This simple 3-part structure is going to be our guide for the rest of this journey. All right, let's jump into that first part, what you have seen. Now, according to this framework, we're not talking about prophecy just yet. This is all about the foundation, the prologue, really, that sets the stage for everything that comes after. So what does this framework do with the opening chapters? Well, it argues that these incredible visions, the glorified Christ in chapter 1, God's heavenly throne in chapter 4, and the Lamb who is worthy in chapter 5, these aren't predictions of the future. Instead, this is what John was seeing right then and there. These visions are here to establish who's in charge before we get to the prophecies. Okay, moving on to the second part of our structure, the things which are. This section zooms in on the letters written to 7 actual historical churches that existed in Asia Minor. But here's the real kicker. In this interpretation, these letters aren't just dusty old mail for some churches from 2,000 years ago. No, they're meant to be a kind of timeless spiritual mirror. They reflect the different states, the good, the bad, the ugly, that churches can find themselves in at any point in history. These letters, which you'll find in chapters 2 and 3, were sent to these 7 real communities in what is now modern-day Turkey. And in this view, each letter has a totally unique message, a praise, a warning, or a specific instruction. It's like a warning to the church at Ephesus to not lose its passion, or praise for the church at Smyrna for holding on through persecution. You see how those themes are just as relevant today as they were back then? And that brings us to the final section, which is also the biggest part of the book by far, the things which will take place later. This is where we get into the real heart of the prophetic message, stretching all the way from chapter 6 to the very end. Now, this is the part of Revelation that gets all the attention, right? Well, according to this framework, everything from chapter 6 all the way to the end in chapter 22 is a chronological story of what's still to come. It starts with a period of global crisis and takes us all the way to a brand new creation. So this timeline here lays out the sequence pretty clearly, as presented by this framework. It kicks off with a 7-year period of intense global trial, which begins with the rise of this figure called the Antichrist. That whole period comes to a dramatic end with the physical return of Christ and the famous Battle of Armageddon. From there, it moves into a literal 1,000-year reign of peace on earth, which is then followed by a final judgment, and the whole thing wraps up with the creation of a new heaven and a new earth. So after all that, the past, the present, and the future, what's the ultimate point of this book? Is it really just to lay out a timeline of super scary events? Well, according to this source material, the answer to that is a hard no. It's easy to think that Revelation's main job is to freak people out with all its intense and sometimes frightening imagery, but this interpretation argues that the real purpose is actually the complete opposite. It's meant to prepare and encourage believers, to give them a sense of hope and urgency about what's to come. And to really get this idea of preparation, the source material uses this really powerful metaphor, Shinbui Danjang.
It's a Korean term that translates to the bride's adornment. The idea is that the church is like a bride, spiritually preparing herself, making herself beautiful and ready to finally meet her groom, who is Christ. It's a pretty powerful image.
So when you boil it all down, the big takeaway from this framework is all about active preparation, not passive fear. It really highlights that blessing promise to anyone who actually engages with the book's message. The point isn't be scared, it's be ready. So by giving us this clear three-part structure, a prologue in the past, a timeless application for the present, and a chronological prophecy for the future, this framework really tries to make one of the most difficult books in the Bible make sense. And the final question it leaves us with is this: how does seeing Revelation as a book of preparation, instead of just a book of prediction, change the way you might approach it?